with Matthew when he's away, you never know what it's going to be because sometimes he gets the day off because it's his birthday, which usually only happens for 6-year-olds in elementary school.
Not 60-year-olds.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, wow. Slap to the face. But yeah, 6-year-olds and Matthew Berry that extends to. But I hope he is okay.
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. I'm Jay Crouch here with Lawrence Jackson. Matthew Berry, back from his day off. How's your day off?
Yeah, you know what? I'll be clear here. First off, it was not my birthday yesterday. My birthday is December 29th. Everyone plan accordingly. It's a Sunday, so I actually will be working this birthday.
Okay, the first one.
Yeah, it would be fine. You know what? I deserve as many days off as I want because I work I work hard. I work hard for the money, me and Donna Summer. But here's the other thing I'm going to tell you guys, okay? So you think I was out gallivanting about yesterday, and you would be right. But I had a good excuse because here's where I was gallivanting. Me and my wife somehow got invited to the White House holiday party.
Oh,
wow! Look at that. That is the seal that's literally in the White House. That's in the East Wing. There you go. That's another room that's there. Obviously, you see the monument behind us as well. My wife Beth and I, we got invited there. Another photo. We took a bunch of photos. If you want to see all the photos, you can go to my Instagram at Matthew Berry TMR. But we weren't the only people invited.
Flavor
Flav. Now,
Mr. Flav.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I don't know how many people remember
Flavor
this.
of love.
Exactly. I don't know how many people remember this, Lawrence. You may not have been on the air when I told this story the original time. But at the Super Bowl this past year, we met him. And so I went up to him, and I'm a fan because who isn't a fan? Everyone loves Flavor Flav. And so I went up to him, and I'm like, I'd like to introduce my wife, Beth. And so I bring him over, or I bring Beth over to meet him. And my wife extends her hand and says, "It's so nice to meet you. What's your name?" To which Flavor Flav is like takes a second there because I don't think anyone in the history of the world has ever said, "What's your name?" because he's so iconic, right? He's so recognizable. And he goes, "I'm Flavor Flav." And to which my wife goes, with no irony whatsoever, "Well, it's so nice to meet you, Flavor." To which he just sort of shrugged and laughed, and I'm like, I'm so sorry, Flavor. Can we take a photo? And so we took a photo, and that was at the Super Bowl this past year. And I told this story on our show. I don't think it was a show you were on, Lawrence, but I told that story here on Happy Hour. So so now we're at the White House, and there's a decent number, big name people, but I see him, and I'm like, oh my God. And Beth now finally recognizes him. So it's like, we've got to go. So I went over to him. I'm like, hey, and he immediately recognized him. He was like, and points, and I'm like, hey. And so I'm like, I don't know if this ever reached your radar or whatever, but, I have this show that I do for Peacock, and I told this story about my wife meeting you the first time, and I went through the whole story that I just told you guys, where she says, nice to meet you, Flavor. And he laughed. He goes, that was you guys? He goes, I totally heard about that story. He's like, I remember seeing you. And he's like, oh, yeah, we got to do another photo. So anyway, he was great. And that was a very funny moment, absolutely. I found it got to his radar. That story made it to his radar.
Do Flavor Flav play fantasy football by any chance?
He does not.
He
At least he did not. I feel I've met him twice now, and he hasn't mentioned it either time. So I assume he does not.
Well, I'd hate for Beth to meet 2 Chainz and call him
Two,
I suppose. Yeah.
Oh, nice to meet you, too.
Nice to meet you, too.
Well, if Flavor Flav is watching and wants to get
Chainz.
into fantasy football, or if 2 Chainz is watching and wants some start-sit advice, this is the show for you. We're going to talk about keep it open or close it out for the fantasy semi-finals, who's eaten good, expectations for men such as Mike Evans, DeVonta Smith, and then a little early line alert. But let's start off with the Rotoworld Player news. Yeah. It's a big news overnight, gentlemen. Michael Penix is the quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta Falcons Twitter account announced Coach Morris has named Michael Penix Jr. the starting quarterback moving forward. And last night we heard from Raheem Morris. This was an hour before the actual announcement. This was Raheem Morris detailing the Falcons' plans at the quarterback position.
Like we talked about right from the beginning, right? We talked about bringing in Kirk, giving us an immediate chance to win. And then we talked about going out and finding a young quarterback that's going to take it to the future because we didn't want to have that gap between the Matt Ryan and then to the next person that we turned it over to, who happened to be Kurt. Didn't want to have that gap again. And that was always things you want to think about. So it's just the initial plan and how you want to go about your business and how you want things to happen. So, like, you could never say there's a downfall to turning it over to somebody that you put a lot of investment into, somebody that you brought in here, somebody that you've done some things with, somebody that's done nothing but the right things since they've been here. So I never want to pit this thing versus Penix and why you don't want to do something like that, Zach. Just being, really smart and cautious in how we go about our business.
All right, so massive. I can't wait to get your thoughts here, Lawrence, Falcons fan that you are. But I just want to let you know right now, Raheem Morris drinks for free today because this is a ballsy move.
Yeah,
he needs
definitely.
all the booze he can get because this is pushing your chips into the middle. This is going all in because let's face it. By the way, look at the artwork. By the way, well done.
Yes, indeed.
There on Raheem Morris's name. But what I would say, guys, is like at the beginning when they drafted Penix, we were like, what a terrible misuse of resources to sign a $100 million contract, fully guaranteed to Kirk Cousins if you're going to go out and draft this guy. And it looks even worse now today. And so Raheem Morris, by doing this move, and you saw the announcement from the team, moving forward, this isn't a one-game thing. They aren't trying to hide it, saying like, Kirk's a little bit banged up, and so he's going to get a start because some phantom injury. Yeah. They're saying like, we are turning this team over to Michael Penix Jr. We'll talk about the fantasy implications in 10 seconds here, or maybe a little bit longer, but whatever. But my point is like, right, this is Morris like pushing it all in because he's been a head coach before. And that didn't work out.
Yep.
And if this doesn't work out, I don't know how you keep him. Like this is somebody that, along with Fontenot, went out and signed Kirk Cousins to a $100 million guaranteed contract, and then drafted Penix, and Kirk Cousins couldn't even last a year. So it's an unbelievable misuse of resources once again. And now they're turning it over to Penix. And we can talk about what it means football-wise and fantasy-wise, but I admire Raheem Morris because the safe thing to do would have been just try to ride it out with Kirk. And they're in the middle of a playoff hunt. They beat the Raiders. Like I get it didn't look good, but it's the Raiders, but they got to win. Like, and they're doing
technically
this.
a win. Technically counted as a win.
And they had to stop a Hail Mary to do it.
Spiritually a loss in every other sense.
At the end of the day, when you look at the standings, it counts as a win. It's a win is a win is a win, right? And they got Giants at Commanders, Panthers. So they got 3 winnable games coming up here. And so, anyway, I give Raheem Morris is a ballsy guy, so I give him a lot of credit for making this move.
None of us were the Falcons playing, like he said. They didn't expect to be starting Penix this soon for this whole year, to be honest, right? You figure they should be able to win the division with Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins isn't the same guy that was how he was playing before he got hurt last season. He actually was on a tear last season. Remember, he beat the 49ers, had a big game against them. But I liken this move to remember about a decade ago, Jim Harbaugh is part of the reason why he's considered a great coach. The 49ers were actually winning. So you got the Falcons here, they sitting at 500. The 49ers were actually winning. He moved off Alex Smith, went to Colin Kaepernick, and then they end up going to the Super Bowl. So it's that kind of, it's that type of ballsy right there. So it has to work in that way. And right now you're working in a division where you had the grip on this. You kind of lost that now. The Bucs are looking significantly better than any other team in this division. But now you got a young kid in here in Penix, and it's kind of like, if he makes these rookie mistakes, well, is it any worse than what you were getting out of your veteran who has playoff experience and things of that sort? But you kind of just try to let him be a rookie right now. But he's a guy who's going to give you some zip on the ball.
We've talked about this with Connor Rogers quite a bit. He was the most pro-ready quarterback coming out of college because he had played so much football as well. We talked about this. He must be in the practice just like zipping it in a way that Kirk Cousins isn't. What did the line do in terms of the line for this game and for the Falcons' chances of winning the South?
So the Falcons' price for the South didn't move too much because I think that, I would say that the median outcome is probably not that different or even worse, but the variance is much more. So there's a lot more upside now for the Falcons. I think that's why they've made this move. The line for this specific game, it was Falcons minus 10.5 before Monday night, and then the world got to see Kirk Cousins move to 9.5, and now it's moved to 8.5. And I think the reason for that is just simply that Kirk Cousins, as bad as he has been, he is a known commodity. Like Michael Penix Penix has never played a meaningful snap in the NFL, so we don't know what he's going to look like. Most rookies in their first game just aren't very good. I know that Kirk was very, very bad against the Raiders, but still, you don't expect Michael Penix to go out there and throw for 350 against the Giants. What I would compare it to is the thing that reminded me most of is when Jamie Foxx came in for Dennis Quaid at the end of Any Given Sunday. Because Kirk Cousins looking very Dennis Quaid at the end of that movie on Monday night.
Yeah, and Jamie led the Sharks to the win. It was the right move by the coach in that one.
Willie Beeman.
Stephen Willie Beeman, of course. Sorry, I forgot the name for a second.
So what are the fantasy repercussions out of this?
I think, look, I have Michael Penix at QB 22. And to your point, wide range of outcomes. Look, the Giants are 25th against the pass over the last 4 weeks. This is not a secondary that scares you. And certainly Penix comes into a system with Drake London, with Kyle Pitts, with Bijan Robinson, with Darnell Mooney, Ray McCloud. Like, there's weapons there. Yeah. So if you tell me that Penix shows up and has, 350, 3 touchdowns, and, gets you 15 yards rushing, 20 yards rushing, that wouldn't shock me. It also wouldn't shock me if he has 175 yards, 1 touchdown, a pick. Bijan has a big game. There's a defensive interception, and there's the total here is 42. My point is, I ranked Penix 22. I wouldn't mind grabbing him and stashing him, but I can't imagine starting him this week in a fantasy semifinal because, to your point, Jay, we have no idea what we're going to see. We think he'll be better. We think there's an opportunity there. But he's not going to have to do that much to win this game. We don't expect, again, with a low total. And so given what we expect on the Giants side of the ball offensively, it's probably going to be a big Bijan game. They're just going to run the ball, try to keep it conservative for the rookie in his first game.
It's exactly what they did against the Raiders. Remember, the Raiders were minus Max Crosby, and they still opted to take the ball out the quarterback's hands. If that is the game plan for the Falcons this week, that will be A-OK. And having them at quarterback 22 is fair. This is why Kirk Cousins is quarterback 29 in fantasy points per game this season. So you kind of expect him, like you said, I expect closer to the 170, 1 touchdown. If you're talking about the weapons for him, the only guys you're feeling extremely confident in starting is Drake London, Bijan Robinson. You can't mess with the other guys until you actually see what he could do. The difference will be when that pocket breaks down, Penix will have some more movement in that pocket, not necessarily just running down the field, but his in-pocket movement, and that's where Kurt has gotten kind of flustered at.
Yeah, we'll talk about Darnell Mooney in a second, but let's get to some other quarterback news. 2 other players got benched yesterday as starting quarterbacks. Jameis Winston is out. DTR is the starter in Cleveland. Will Levis, after another inglorious start, he is benched too. Mason Rudolph expected to get the go at Indianapolis. Matthew, does this change that much? This feels like much ado about nothing, but I think you have to downgrade the Browns' pass catchers without Jameis.
Massively. He's had 3 career starts, Dorian Thompson-Robinson has. He's averaging under 7 fantasy points per game in those 3 starts. He's averaging 140 yards per game, 1 touchdown, 4 interceptions. He's not great. Nothing we have seen so far. I feel this is awful for fantasy, right? Because we were going to get Jameis Winston against Cincinnati. Jameis versus Burrow. That's what
he was going to throw for 300.
Yeah, and 3 interceptions. It was going to be like fantasy fireworks. And now I think that they will try to run the ball a lot. DTR often tucks it and runs. So I just don't see how you can start. I don't think you can start Jerry Jeudy or Elijah Moore. We don't know what Cedric Tillman's going to do as well, despite the fact that it's, in theory, a great matchup, right? The Bengals are a bottom 3 pass defense over the last month. He's just, at what the sample size we have on Dorian Thompson-Robinson is so bad in terms of what the production could be for the passing game. We don't know if David Njoku is going to go. If David Njoku does manage getting the start, then I could see him as a borderline tight end 1 just because you see some short passes. So I'm as, a top 10, borderline top 10 tight end. I have Njoku right now at tight end 10, and maybe there's some dump offs for Jerome Ford, but this just kills the Browns offense. And if you've been riding Jeudy or Elijah Moore, I would not start him. I will give you an example. I'm in a 12-team league where you have to play defenses. I dropped Elijah Moore to pick up the Bengals defense when this move was made because there was no way I'm starting Elijah Moore with DTR under center, and I actually think the Bengals defense is viable in this league going against, a guy that's got 4 interceptions in 3 games and is probably prone to getting some sacks and Bengals playing at a higher level recently.
That's why he's in the game, because it's similar to what's going on in Atlanta. Jameis just throwing too many damn interceptions, so you gotta do something.
Lawrence, on the Titans, perhaps much ado about nothing from an NFL standpoint, but Will Levis and Mason Rudolph, really different styles of quarterback. Will Levis, a lot more boom or bust, more variance. Mason Rudolph, more, I guess, your typical game manager type of backup quarterback. How does this impact the backfield, Calvin Ridley, the pass catchers in Tennessee?
Well, I think it'll help the receivers a smidget, just to the point where Mason Rudolph's not a guy who's going to run the ball as much. The thing, Will Levis gives you a chance down the field. It got to the point where we would say, what can Ridley do with Levis? But Levis had actually proven he could still, keep Calvin Ridley fantasy relevant. But Mason Rudolph could do the same thing, and he won't be taking opportunities from these guys with the running. Not probably, but a little less turnover prone at this stage in their career, just your typical drop back passer. So Ridley's value will be the same. He's been good this year with both Mason Rudolph and Will Levis, so it doesn't change for him. Tajay Spears, he had the touchdowns last week, but it wasn't. He didn't have much production, just touchdowns. So same for him.
I mean, I think the way you attack Indianapolis is running the ball. Right? So I think if you're starting Pollard, if you would start Spears, you're starting him. Colts are a bottom 5 run defense over the last month. And I just think, to your point, yes, Calvin Ridley, Mason Rudolph, and Will Levis both have a propensity to chuck it deep. Or they're not scared to. But other than that, so I think it's just sort of business as usual. Again, that game is 42.5. We expect a low total. Colts are favored by 3.5. So in theory, Tennessee might be in a little bit of negative game script here, but I think they're gonna try to run the ball and try to limit what Rudolph does.
I think they'll
some deep
still
shots
run even if they're behind. I think they
sure.
still keep running, to be honest.
Yep. All right, let's jump to keep it open or close it out. Some start-sit decisions for the fantasy semifinals. And as an OG Brock Purdy truther, saddens me, Matthew, to see his name in this segment, but he was horrific against the Rams in the rain, which is his kryptonite. As soon as the rain starts to fall from the skies, Brock Purdy turns into a pumpkin, and now he goes to Miami. You're keeping it open on Mr. Purdy.
I am keeping it open. I'm lowering him a little bit normal than I would be. I have him at QB9, right? So you mentioned the bad game in the weather, in the rain against the Rams. Well, the other bad game he's had was against the Bills in the snow. He's not. We've seen this throughout his career. It's, whether it was the Packers game the other year, but he's been bad in the elements. But on the road at Miami, we expect it to be nice weather, decent weather. Miami in December, always lovely. And the Dolphins have allowed at least 17 fantasy points to a quarterback in 3 of their last 4 home games. And so Purdy, outside of the weather, remember they did have the mini bye last week, so they've had 10 days to prepare for this Dolphins defense as well. They're 26th, the Dolphins are, in pass defense since week 8. So Brock Purdy comes in at quarterback 9 for me. I am keeping it open.
I'm a little nervous about this, to be honest.
I get it.
I'm not going to count Josh Allen being good against the Dolphins recently, because that's Josh Allen. Quarterbacks that are more closer to his tier, a guy like Jordan Love, who was quarterback 15 against the Dolphins in week 13. Matthew Stafford was quarterback 20 against them in week 10. Then just last week, C.J. Stroud didn't play a great game against them. Tua just handed that game to the Texans on a platter. So I'm kind of nervous about now I know recently, like you said, they've been bad recently, but for the season, Miami is still top 3 in fantasy against quarterbacks this season. So I'm going to keep it closed this week for Brock Purdy.
Closing it out on Brock Purdy. Where do you have him ranked?
I'm closing him out outside the top 15. I was actually surprised when you said I got him a little lower, and then you had him at, I think QB9 is high. That's like,
I think he's for much of the season, he's been in that 5 to 7 range. So
I was getting texts from people last week about, do I start Brock Purdy or Jalen Hurts? We're a week away from that. I think he had a really bad game, but he's had really bad games in the rain before and then bounced back previously, so I think he will be okay. Lawrence, my man Najee Harris, rough game last week against Philadelphia. The Steelers offense just couldn't do anything. Now he gets a tough Ravens run defense, so keeping it open or closing it out on Najee.
I'm going to close it out on Najee. I'm even more scared for this matchup. Look, one running back has run for more than 65 yards this whole season against this Ravens defense. That's Saquon Barkley. Again, we're not going to use Najee Harris to compare here. He did play, oh man. You see him last week there, 6 carries, 14 yards. I think the offense as a whole is why you can't start Najee Harris. Without George Pickens, the Steelers offense loses some of its identity. Their identity is try to run the ball, try to throw one over the top to George Pickens. They haven't had that. You've seen that the past 2 games. It's affected the whole offense. Russ isn't as mobile as he used to be. So I'm going to keep it closed on Najee Harris.
Yeah, I am as well. Again, you mentioned the fact that Saquon Barkley is the only one that's had even a modicum of success against the Ravens running the ball. They allow the 8th fewest fantasy points to opposing running backs. He's just not involved in the passing game either. We've seen Jaylen Warren get more and more involved in the Steelers' offense. Harris has 2 or fewer targets in 4 of the past 6 games. And by the way, we don't know at this stage, as we're doing this show on a Wednesday afternoon, whether or not George Pickens is going to play. And I just feel like without Pickens, like we saw last week, without Pickens, this offense is just like, there's just no threat at all. All due respect to the Calvin Austins of the world. Like they're like, we'll take our chances. And so they're going to load the box even more, and they maybe don't even need to. Like, I'm at running back 28. I'm nervous about him. I'm closing it out. There's season low in touches, yards, and fantasy points last week, and now he's got Baltimore. Like, there's nothing you can point to other than the fact that he's a running back that makes you feel good about this weekend. So too much at stake this week for me to risk him.
Yep, Steelers 6-point dogs in Baltimore. And we saw this matchup a few weeks ago, and the Steelers didn't score a touchdown in that game. So might be tough sledding for them again. Matthew, Tyrone Tracy, it's been an up and down year for the Giants rookie. He's had some really good moments and some really grim moments, particularly in Germany. And now he gets the Falcons. He's had under 12 touches in 2 of his past 3 games. So you're keeping it open on Tyrone Tracy?
I'm reluctantly, very reluctantly keeping it open. Look, here's the positives, right? Last 3 games, he's played 75% of the snaps. He's gotten almost 70% of the team's running back touches. Now, the frustrating thing is the offense isn't very good. The quarterback position is such a disaster. Devin Singletary vultured a touchdown from him last week as well. But he did get a goal line carry. Like, he got an opportunity, he got stuffed, and then they brought in Singletary on 3rd down, and he converted it. But he's now had 4 straight games with a goal line rushing attempt. And basically a 15% target share as well. So they're using him with dump-offs. There's a little bit of a floor here. I will tell you, I'm in 2 different playoffs. I'm in a 12-team redraft league, and then plays like a couple of flexes, and then I'm in my dynasty league, 12-team dynasty league. Both are pretty deep leagues. I'm starting Tyrone Tracy in both of them. So maybe I'm just trying to talk myself into it because I don't have a better option on either of those teams. But I think I'm at 24, which is like a mid-tier flex. He's somebody that'll get you probably 10 points, 10 to 12 points with a shot at a touchdown.
You'd be good with that.
That's what I think he can do.
He'd got the touchdown last week. As you just saw on our screen there before, he still played 67% of the snaps to Devin Single's 35. On that drive when Devin Singletary scored a touchdown, Tracy was in there the whole drive.
Yeah.
They was like, here, come out for a breather. Let Singletary get this touchdown. And if there's one more positive, the Falcons have given up a touchdown to a running back in 3 of their last 4 games. So it can be had against the Falcons. Even if they're chasing points, Tyrone Tracy's still good there as well in the receiving game.
Okay, DK Metcalf, Lawrence, who's had 4 straight games under 11 fantasy points, where there's question marks about the health of Geno Smith. Expectation he's probably going to try, give it a go, but may not be at full health. Tough matchup against the Vikings, so keeping it open or closing it out on DK.
Well, we're going to keep it open if Geno's playing. If it's Hall of Famer Sam Howell, we're gonna have to
future Hall of Famer. He's not in yet.
He ain't in yet. We're going to have to close it out. But
dimension.
let's say Geno's playing. We'll keep it open. Minnesota has allowed the most receiving yards to wide receivers this season. They allowed the most fantasy points per game to wide receivers, and they're tied for 8th at most touchdowns allowed to wide receivers. So all those things tell you that the deep ball defense for Minnesota ain't good, and we know what DK Metcalf. I know we keep having DK Metcalf on here. We keep saying, hey, ride with him, but damn it, we telling you to do it again, especially against this Minnesota Vikings defense. I'm going to keep it open for DK.
I'm keeping it open as well. Again, assuming Geno Smith plays. By the way, while we're on the air right now, just got an alert from the Bleacher Nation Fantasy app, which is fantastic, the Bleacher Nation Fantasy app. So this is a tweet from, just gives you all the alerts of breaking news. Mike McDonald said Geno Smith was in the Seahawks morning walkthrough and will practice in some capacity this afternoon. He is ultimately feeling good. As my screen just went black for a second there. He said Smith, who injured his right knee Sunday night, is feeling good. So he's going to practice in some capacity this afternoon. So considering this is a Wednesday, feels likely that Geno's going to give it a go. I'm at wide receiver 31, so his low-end wide receiver 3. So there is some risk here. But again, keeping it open because you mentioned, Lawrence, absolutely right, this Vikings defense can be beaten deep. They're vulnerable to the deep pass, and obviously they're going to take some shots to Metcalf down the field. No team's allowed more receptions on deep passes than the Vikings. No team allows more yards to wide receivers than the Minnesota Vikings. Keeping it open on DK Metcalf, again, assuming Geno Smith gets the start.
Okay, Matthew. Deebo Samuel plays the Miami Dolphins, coming off, I don't know if it was statistically the worst game of his career, but vibes-wise, it was the worst game of his career against the Rams. With everything going wrong for Deebo, he's been 4.7 points per game since week 11. So I'm assuming that this is a close-it-out job.
This is indeed a close-it-out job. I think Brock Purdy has a top 10 finish at Miami, but it's because of Juwan Jennings and the running back and Kittle, and not Deebo Samuel, who hasn't had a game with more than 22 receiving yards since week 10. He's had only one game this entire year with more than 15 rushing yards. That was week 1. So they're not really using him in the backfield despite all the injuries to the position. It's not a good matchup against the Dolphins, right? Miami allows the third fewest fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. And to your point, Jay, about how bad he's been, you mentioned, since week 11, how he's averaging, he's had, 5 straight games with, single-digit fantasy points. Since week 11, he's wide receiver 84 in points per game.
Bad.
Wide receiver 84. That is not good. That is stinky. We love Deebo here. He's a friend of the show, but he's going to be sitting on my bench for the fantasy playoffs.
How come
if you made it to the fantasy playoffs, you made it despite Deebo, not because of him.
You got to rank him like wide receiver 75. Actually, that would be a no rank in your rankings because we don't rank.
I'm at 38 this week. In school, sometimes they'll give you the gentleman C. I gave Deebo the gentleman's 38, wide receiver 38.
What's this gentleman C stuff?
You never heard this phrase? You've heard this phrase, right, Lawrence?
Yeah.
I think we do.
A gentleman C is just sort of like, if it's a teacher is just like, you know what, you're not. I'll give you an example. I grew up in Texas, right? And so I ended up having to take Spanish. And I was the only
Senor Matty.
Mateo. Me llamo Mateo. And I will tell you, I was the only.
No te llamas Mateo.
So you had to take 2 years of Spanish. First year intro to Spanish, I was fine. I did fine. So I ended up getting into this. Somehow getting it. I was just like, Spanish honors, perfect. I'll do that. And so I'll never forget this. Senora Worley gets up there, and I'm the only person. I'm the only white kid in the class, and I'm the only one that doesn't speak Spanish at home. Everyone in that class is bilingual except for me, who just took the class. And so Senora Worley gets up in the front of the class. She goes, "Welcome to Spanish 2 honors. I am Senora Worley, and these are the last words I will speak in English for the rest of the semester." And she proceeds to teach the entire semester just in Spanish. And she's speaking fast, and I'm just like, and so I was in over my head. And luckily, I had some friends there that would sort of trying to help me out, but. In that class, I got a gentleman C.
Okay.
Right? She liked me. She knew I was in over my head. I tried hard. I was never going to get there. I was outclassed by all my fellow students, so that I got the gentleman C from her.
So in fantasy football terms, wide receiver 84 is an F.
Okay.
Yes.
Wide receiver 38 is a C.
I'm just generous. I'm being generous here.
I think we have a rougher edge in Australia. We don't need letter grades. We're just like, you got a 0 out of 10.
Like you pass it.
Just out. There's no.
You did or you didn't.
Do it again next year.
You know what they should do though? It would be great if you put this in suggestion box. Is like on a scale of 1 to 5 kangaroos. How many?
I was waiting for the kangaroo reference.
This was good, Jay. You get 3.5 kangaroos.
Every time I bring up Australia, there's -300. It'll be followed by a kangaroo reference.
Yeah. Go ahead
is
and
there
wear a
another
kangaroo.
animal? I could switch to koalas.
Wallaby, koala,
Koala.
some sort of
Foster's beer. Spam.
Foster's beer, which
Foster's
again we
beer.
don't drink
Yeah.
in Australia
Yeah.
because it's
Yahoo Serious?
purely a media conspiracy. Foster's beers, so you can't actually buy
You
it in
Australians
Australia.
should drink Bud Light like the rest of us Americans.
It's true. I've been trying to get it going in Australia from day one. All right, Darnell Mooney, Lawrence. He plays the Giants. Bit more variance in his role now that the Kirk Cousins show is over. The Penix show is in. He hasn't done much lately, but that's with Kirk Cousins. So you're willing to roll the dice with Penix now in town?
No, especially not in game one. And hell, we're at the end of the fantasy season, so I don't even know if you could start Darnell Mooney for the rest of the season because we don't know who Michael Penix has that in-game chemistry with yet. Then you add on to the fact that over the past 4 games, he only has a 15% target share, so he's kind of cooled off, as you can see here. So we talked about it earlier. With Michael Penix coming in, the game plan will probably be to let Bijan eat. So until we see something, I got to close it out on Darnell Mooney.
Yeah, look, I'm closing it out on Darnell Mooney. I will say, look, you can leave the light on for a little bit of hope here, right? Because all he basically needs is one play. Like, Penix has a big arm. You could certainly see them taking a deep shot. And
They're going to do that.
Right. Is there an opportunity that Mooney catches one and goes and all of a sudden you've got like a 70-yard touchdown? Absolutely. There is a chance that no team allows a higher completion percentage on deep passes than the New York Giants. So that's going to be available to him. It's just, as we've talked about, we've never seen Michael Penix play an NFL game. There's so much variance. They may not need to do that much passing. They may want to scale it back. Again, in the last 4 games for Mooney, he's had a 15% target share. He's had only 1 end zone target this year. So you really need that deep pass. And to me, like, I might keep it open if we were in like week 7 and you're like, let's see, it's the Giants and, but it's week 16. Too much is at stake. You're in win or go home mode. So I'm closing it out on Darnell Mooney. I want to see it on the field first before I'm willing to trust him outside my top 40
Kurt
for the week.
only threw it 17 times
Right.
last game, and they won. So if you could get away with that and win, do it.
Yeah.
Yep.
For
Can't
sure.
trust the Moon Man with the money on the table in the fantasy playoffs. Last one for us, Matthew, Dalton Kincaid against the Patriots. Are you willing to gamble on the roulette game that is the Bills pass catchers in this matchup, where they are 2 touchdown favorites?
I'm reluctantly keeping it open again on Dalton Kincaid. He's my tight end 11 as well. It's a nice matchup with New England. Last 4 weeks, the Patriots allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. His first game back last week, he had a 22% target share. Now, again, Josh was throwing it everywhere. I mean, and maybe Amari Cooper earns a target this week. But but whatever. Dalton Kincaid had a north of 20% target share last week. He's had at least a 19% target share in every full game since week 4. So given the state of the tight end position, given the matchup with the Patriots who struggle against the position, and the fact that Kincaid looked healthy last week, should have had a touchdown. He caught a touchdown that was called back due to penalty. It was that great chest throw from Josh Allen on the move. I'm keeping it open on Dalton Kincaid.
Yeah, I'm keeping it open, and I'm actually encouraged that in his first game back, he tied for the team lead in targets in the first game back. Like, especially in a game where, like you said, Josh Allen throwing it all over the place. You like to see that Dalton Kincaid was so involved so quickly coming back. So I'll keep it open. It's four catches, 53 yards. Yeah, I'll keep that open.
Okay, let's take a look at the recap of Matthew's Keep It Open, Close It Out rankings. Brock Purdy at the Dolphins, QB9, keeping it open on him. My best friends, my fantasy soulmate, Najee Harris, for closing it out, RB28 at the Ravens. Tyrone Tracy reluctantly keeping it open at the Falcons. DK Metcalf, wide receiver 31, keeping it open, assuming that Geno Smith plays, which it is trending towards he will. Deebo Samuel, the show is over there, closing it out, wide receiver 38. The Moon Man against the Giants, Darnell Mooney, closing it at wide receiver 45. And then Dalton Kincaid, tight end 11, keeping it open.
By the way, just got an alert as well. Tyrone Tracy limited in practice today with an ankle. It's a Wednesday. I'm not really worried about it. Again, he practiced. He was just limited, but something to keep an eye on just since we mentioned it.
Okay, let's take a look at injuries we are tracking. There are some big ones here. The biggest of all is Patrick Mahomes with his ankle. We'll talk about that in a sec. Geno Smith with the knee. Matthew gave the update earlier. Looks like he'll participate in practice, trending in the right direction. Aiden O'Connell, positive updates there, looking like he will give it a go this week. Alvin Kamara Kamara dealing with the groin. We'll have to track that with the Saints having not much to play for anymore. Jaleel McLaughlin dealing with the quad. Jalen Waddle, troublesome knee. Xavier Legette with a groin injury. And then Zach Ertz dealing with a concussion before a massive game against the Eagles.
If Legette can't go, Cokeheads unite. It might be finally our time. Jalen Coker had the big play for the touchdown last week as well. Malik Washington would get more run if Waddle can't go. Kamara's an interesting one as well. Like Kendre Miller is starting to get more run. I do think that if Kendre Miller, who's available in 74% of Yahoo leagues, and in the 2 games since he came off IR, has gotten 19 touches. 19 touches in 2 games. So he's basically averaging double-digit touches. Did that math in my head. Didn't even...
Very clever. You learn a lot at the White House.
Yeah, I really did, honestly.
That's Syracuse education.
You're damn right. Yeah, go Cuse. Cuse is in the house. Kendre Miller is somebody that should be rostered because I think I don't know how severe this Kamara injury is, but it feels like it's nagging.
What's the point of playing him?
Yeah, they clearly are trying to get Miller more playing time, and if this injury is a little bit more serious as the week goes on, just beat the rush to the waiver wire. Try to grab Kendre Miller, and then if Kamara turns out fine, you can get. But they're trying to make a thing of Kendre Miller this week, and I do think there's a non-zero chance Kamara could miss this game from what you're hearing out of New Orleans. So I think he's a priority. One other name that wasn't there, Joe Mixon, feels like he's a little bit nicked up. The Texans are more or less locked into the 4 seed. And so, it would be very, very hard for them not to be the 4 seed, regardless of what happens down the stretch. Mixon has been bad basically 2 of the last 3 games, including this past weekend. Now, so Dameon Pierce. Now, I'd have to be in a super, super deep league and super, super desperate to pick up Dameon Pierce and start him because, by the way, even if Mixon is out, and we knew he was out, they play the Chiefs this week and then the Ravens. So it's a brutal schedule.
Yeah.
The idea of starting Dameon Pierce against the Ravens with a fantasy playoffs on the line is a little, I'd have to be super crazy desperate.
Well,
but sometimes we are super crazy desperate, I think. But more importantly, I think the bigger point here, regardless of whether you pick up Pierce or not, is just there's a chance that Mixon either doesn't play or might be more limited in his playing time because he's been so volume heavy these days this year.
Short week as well for the Texans. Staying in that game, the biggest injury of all is, of course, Patrick Mahomes, and we heard from Patrick Mahomes speaking about his ankle injury.
Obviously, we've put ourselves in good position to where I guess I wouldn't say it was dire that I play. I mean, it's something where it's not like in the AFC Championship game where we're playing to get to the Super Bowl. I mean, we have a little bit of room to kind of spare, but at the end of the day, we're trying to win. We're trying to win the football game, and I'm a competitor. I want to go out there and play. So I'll push myself to get to the best place possible over these next few days, and we'll be able to make a decision then.
Okay, Patrick Mahomes. It did look bad when it first happened, but promising that he has been a full participant in practice. It really seems like he is going to give it a go, even though they have these 2 games very closely together, playing the Steelers on Christmas after this Saturday game. But if they can win both of those games, then the 1 seed is secure and he can take week 18 off.
He's going to limp to 55 rushing yards and probably a rushing touchdown, too. It's like when we saw that.
Didn't this guy get an ankle? He got a high ankle sprain in a playoff game. Chad Henne had to do 2 series, and then he came back,
Came back. And then went the rest of the games.
And speaking as a fantasy manager, and definitely not somebody who works for NBC and Peacock, who will broadcast the game this Saturday, Patrick Mahomes is definitely going to play. I tune into the show, tune into the game to see, definitely, but I believe he will.
The last time Patrick Mahomes limped off in agony with an ankle injury, he returned 30 minutes later and had one of the greatest runs in Super Bowl history to ice the game against the Eagles. So I suspect that he's going to go. The other thing, too, is when you're a full participant on a Wednesday, and that generally means that you're going to play, particularly if you are a superstar player.
That line, KC -3, I think that's rather close because I haven't been convinced about the Texans this whole season. Now we haven't been convinced about the Chiefs, but we know the Chiefs have done this time and time again.
Okay.
And I will say that very quickly, I don't know that Mahomes, if for some reason Mahomes is out, that it changes that much. You're still starting Pacheco, you're still starting Travis Kelce, and I don't know that there's any pass catcher other than Kelsey on the Chiefs that you felt great about, whether even if Mahomes is like, you know what I mean? Like, they spread it around so much. The Texans have a good secondary.
Hollywood Brown as well, potentially back in the mix.
Right, exactly. Hollywood Brown might be back, and so he might take some snaps away. You know, they're trying to do different stuff with Xavier Worthy. Noah Gray's getting in there. Of course, you got DeAndre Hopkins in a revenge game against his former team. Maybe they do try to get it to Hop, but I don't feel like Wentz would be that massive a downgrade in terms of what we're talking about. Like, again, if Wentz is starting, you're still starting Travis Kelce. If Wentz is starting, you're still starting Isaiah Pacheco.
Yeah.
You feel worse about Wentz than you do about Mahomes, of course, but like, I don't know that for our purposes it changes that much.
No, I don't think it changed much there. Obviously, the line will move 6 points.
I was going to say, would it be Texans favored by 3 if Wentz is under center?
I think it flips 6 points, Mahomes to Wentz. But yeah, from fantasy perspective, it doesn't, it's just Kelce and Pacheco. They're the only guys that you feel good about. Although, I feel better about starting Patrick Mahomes than I do about Carson Wentz.
Oh, for sure.
That's the
for sure. But I don't know that Mahomes is definitely a starter this week. Yep. Again, on a gimpy ankle against a
great Texans.
So that's when he end up doing his best somehow.
That's
I don't know.
Yeah, he is Superman. All right, ringing the holiday season with a double dip of NFL football on NBC and Peacock this weekend. It all kicks off Saturday at noon Eastern as we lead you up to kickoff between the Texans and Chiefs. Then on Sunday night, Baker Mayfield and the Bucs travel to Dallas for a date with the Cowboys. When we come back,
poor Cooper Rush can't.
I'm about
make
to
the
say
graphic.
all the quarterbacks up there.
They got Stroud, Baker, Mahomes, and Micah.
Fully supportive of Micah Parsons being on that graphic over Cooper Rush. All right, when we come back, who's eating good? We'll talk about Mike Evans, DeVonta Smith, and more.
So good on the scramble drills. Why don't you guys have that together?
Mike works his tail off. He's always trying to get open, always trying to get the ball, which is what you want in a guy. But it's not the ego part about it. It's part of when it's not going to be a pretty 3-step, 5-step drop and ball out on time every single play. So he understands that things are going to happen. He's got to work wherever direction I'm going, and he did that.
All right, who's eating good? Presented by Applebee's. Tell you what, guys, one of my favorite little stories of the past 2 years in the NFL, the renaissance of Baker Mayfield, the Baker-sance. It's been fantastic.
I'm with you on that.
Really happy to have him back in our lives and not in a Carolina Panthers uniform because it looked weird on him.
Love Baker, friend of the show, really easy guy to root for, very fun. It was a great interview we had on Super Bowl Row. Don't let Jay's propaganda and the photo dissuade you. Him and I were boys, and you just sort of snuck in there at the end. You made him wait.
It'd be like that sometimes.
I know.
Well, that's the thing. This is my favorite thing about Baker Mayfield, not to derail us, but I screwed up the timing and the schedule there. So Baker Mayfield had to sit on set for like 14 minutes waiting for me to come back from getting like an acai bowl because I didn't realize that we were doing the interview. And he was totally good. Like, came back, shakes my hand, super nice, chatted afterwards, just a really good dude, easy guy to cheer for. So very happy to see the success that he is having. And one of the big beneficiaries of that success, Matthew, is Mike Evans, who's eaten good and gets a very favorable matchup against the Cowboys, come back from that troublesome hamstring injury and just looks like Mike Evans again.
He certainly does. I mean, obviously you're starting him. He's my wide receiver 9 this week. But here's the interesting thing. So much has been made about Mike Evans and that 1,000-yard mark, right? He's gotten 1,000 yards in every year of his NFL career. He's got the NFL record for most seasons to start a career with 1,000 yards. But if he gets to 1,000 this year, he ties Jerry Rice, the GOAT, Jerry Rice, with 11 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. Jerry Rice is the only guy in the NFL that has 11 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. Mike Evans would be the first one to do it for the first 11 seasons of his career. He needs 251 yards, and I bet you anything, the Buccaneers and Baker Mayfield are aware of that. So they're going to try to feed him. They're also going to try to feed him because they need to win games, and he's a really good player. He's unbelievable. I just think, obviously, he's a locked-in wide receiver 1. Feels like he's always underrated in fantasy drafts, Lawrence, especially the last couple of years.
Yeah, and he'll be underrated going into next season, too, because he'll be, he's whatever he is, 31, 32, whatever. As you could see, 9 for 159 and 2 touchdowns shows you he needs 251 yards to get this 1,000. He's the type of, I'm not saying he's going to get it this game, but he could. He could get, especially with Trayvon Diggs banged up there at cornerback, like he could get this in one game. He went for 159. Any player who gets 159 can get 251 in the game. Man, you just love to see it. Him and Baker together having that connection. It worked quick. Tom Brady was out. Baker Mayfield was in. And it was like there was no beat missed there. So you love to see that.
Yeah, it's weird to talk about Evans as underrated, given that he's good every single year. He's played in the Super Bowl. He played on a team with Tom Brady, but it doesn't feel like, I guess because he's never been the best wide receiver in the sport, right? He's always been in that 6 to 8 type of range, very solid. But I think that now, like Baker Mayfield, they certainly have a great connection, that telepathy.
I think Mike Evans is going to be a Hall of Famer when all is said and done. And to your point about, listen, Cowboys have been bad at home all year long, and they're a bottom 10 pass defense over the last 4 weeks before you even get into the fact that the secondary is banged up. So, Mike Evans should eat good again on Saturday.
Okay. By the way, just because I like to bring it up all the time, let's take a look at me and Baker Mayfield together.
Sure.
There we are.
There we are.
The
Look,
two
this is
of
so
us.
outrageous.
The two of us and 14% of Matthew Berry. That's the perfect amount of Matthew Berry, let me tell you. Particularly the Super Bowl. 14% of Senor Mateo next to me and Baker Mayfield after, sorry, Baker, for keeping you waiting for a long time. But no, great to chat with Baker. Great to see his continued success and long may it continue. All right, let's jump to DeVonta Smith, who got right last week against the Steelers as the Eagles heavily overcorrected and leaned into the pass. Matthew, do you think this is sustainable, or do you think that was just 1 week to the squeaky wheel and to quiet the noise?
Somewhere in between. I don't know that it's sustainable in the sense that I think that this happens every single week. I do think it's sustainable for this week. A couple of things going in his favor, right? Number one is no Dallas Goedert. So again, there's a narrow target tree with the two of them. And the expectation here is that Marshawn Lattimore at least will be on A.J. Brown some of the time. I don't know that he shadows necessarily, and they move those guys around, but at least some of the time, Jalen Hurts is going to be looking around. He's going to see Lattimore on A.J. Brown, and he's going to go to DeVonta Smith, who last week had season highs in target share, reception, receiving yards, and fantasy points. In the 5 games that Dallas Goedert has missed this season, he's got a 31% target share. He's averaging over 16 fantasy points per game. And so going up against my beloved Commanders in a game in which, they should be all right. I think to be honest with you, I'm surprised the line's not bigger than 3.5 for this one. Are you?
No, I think the Commanders' offense is legitimately excellent. I think that was ridiculous. That game against the Saints was so close. That was a blowout win that just happened to be a 1-point win in the end. So I think the Commanders, they came off the bye. Jayden Daniels looked fantastic against the Saints. And look, I have more faith in Jayden Daniels than Jalen Hurts as a quarterback. So I think they have.
I ain't going there.
I have a lot more faith.
Jayden Daniels is better than Jalen Hurts.
No,
Sorry.
he's not.
No, he is.
No, he's not.
I'm not there yet either. I think it's closer than most.
Statistically, this year it's not close.
Yes,
not remotely close.
Yeah, well, they're asking those guys to do different things. I will say this:
what are the Commanders going to try to stop? Like I saw this last week against
their line's terrible. Their line got dominated on both sides of the ball.
Oh,
against the Saints.
How would Jayden Daniels look behind the Eagles' offensive line with
amazing.
Saquon Barkley and A.J. Brown, DeVonta Smith?
Sure.
He'd win the MVP.
Yeah.
We don't know because he don't play for them. Like we can't just
plays
put
for a
we
worse
can't
team.
we can't
And he's been better
put
than
Travis Hunter on Boise State and Ashton Jitty on. We can't do that. We just could work with what we got. What are they going to choose? The Commanders. What are your Commanders going to choose to try to stop? Are they going to try to stop the run? If that's the case, then Jalen Hurts is going to throw for another 250 to 300 yards to A.J. Brown. I saw it against the Ravens, too. The Ravens couldn't pick their poison on defense. They tried to. Saquon Barkley ended up running good late. It just depends on what they try. If the Eagles could win the game and Jalen Hurts could throw 400 yards. That's just how that's how this team is. That's just how it's going to be.
Okay, last guy for us, Jerry Jeudy at the Bengals. Very favorable matchup, but Lawrence, quarterback downgrade clearly with DTR and James.
Yeah, like we talked about DTR a little bit earlier. 3 career starts. He's averaging 140 passing yards. He only has 1 touchdown pass in all of those games that he started. Jerry Jeudy is a completely different receiver with one Jameis Winston. Why? Because Jameis Winston is going to let it fly, and those interceptions that he throws does not affect Jerry Jeudy. But it will affect Jerry Jeudy with DTR if we're not able to sustain some drives here on the offense. So he's been eating good. Hell, he's been eating great. If we're grading on a curve, he's probably ate the best this whole second half of the season, but I don't see it happening as much now that we got DTR in.
I agree. We just can't trust that quarterback situation. All right. Before we hit the last call, want a different way to watch Texans at Chiefs on Saturday? We have it for you on Peacock. Tune in to the EA Sports Madden NFL cast at 1 p.m. Eastern for an innovative crossover between video game and live action. All right, we're going to hit our last break. When we come back, last call, early line alert. We'll tell you what we're betting heading into Week 16. DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns, and new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Download the app and use promo code BERRY when you sign up. DraftKings Sportsbook. The crowd is yours!
Yeah, I think it's yours.
Lord,
Yeah, it might be yours.
Lord.
I just checked my notes. It is indefinitely yours.
Okay, early line
Most
alert.
certainly yours.
Totals above 45. Some big ones, not quite to the extent of Bills-Lions, that 54.5 last week, but Sunday Night Football, Bucks-Cowboys, 48.5. The Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts controversial showdown, 45.5 as well. Matthew, what is your best bet at the moment?
I'm taking the Bills team total over 30.5. Okay, Bills have now scored at least 30 points in 8 straight games. So I'm surprised their team total is only 30.5 against the Patriots. Look, the Patriots scoring defense over the last 4 weeks, I should say, 29th in the NFL. There's only 3 teams that have been worse. And one of the teams that have been worse, the Buffalo Bills, actually. The over-under this game is 46. I don't think they get blown out here. I mean, I think the Patriots move the ball enough that Josh Allen continues to do Josh Allen things. Give me the Bills team total over 30.5.
Okay. Give me the Ravens alt line minus 13.5. That's at plus 212 over these Steelers. They're gonna smoke them this time. Justin Tucker's gonna make those kicks. They're not gonna have 90 yards in penalties. They're gonna run. They're gonna do what the Eagles did to them. Basically, that's what they're gonna do to them. Offense isn't good right now for the Steelers.
I like that. Everyone's focusing on Lamar Jackson's struggles against the Steelers. No one's talking about how Russell Wilson had a terrible game last time he played the Ravens.
If I was the Ravens, I would be more scared to play Justin Fields this game than Russell Wilson.
Fair.
Yep, no, I don't mind that. All right, I'm taking the Texans +3 against the Chiefs, going head-to-head with Lawrence here. I think that Mahomes, gimpy ankle, Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson off the edge, and also this Chiefs pass defense has been terrible since Jaylen Watson went down. And I think it'll be good news for the Texans that the Chiefs run defense is so good because they won't run Joe Mixon 50 times into the line and they'll actually throw it down the field to Nico Collins, to Tank Dell. So I think that the Texans have been so underwhelming all season. I just still trust the talent, and I still trust CJ Stroud's going to turn it around at some point. So I'll take Texans +3 against the team of the Chiefs that basically, and last week notwithstanding, refuses to ever cover NFL.
I was just going to say they've only covered once this year or something like that.
A
couple times.
They went a 7-game stretch without covering. So pretty bleak there, and I think that the Texans cover the +3.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I don't mind that call at all. And of course, Lawrence taking an alt line at plus money.
I like it.
He's on brand. He's always on brand. All right.
They might want to buy more.
Here's what that music means. It's closing time, and you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Also, you probably shouldn't go to the White House because it's really significant security. I had to go through 5 different gates.
Big time.
For Jay and Lawrence, I am Matthew. We will see you back tomorrow. Maybe Connor will show up. He's probably at the White House now. Peace out. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotoworld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Rotoworld fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.